Okay. So today we are talking about we finished this week where we talked about forms and advanced forms, how to build forms. We also talked about classes, class components. We talked about React lifecycle, which is basic component did mount, component will mount, component will unmount. So we did all that. We did the sprint project. Hopefully you guys finished that. And then we took a break. So now we're coming back to state management. So we're going to be doing today context API, or context as they call it now. I think they changed the name to just the context. That's what we're going to talk about today. And I'll explain what it is, what it does. So let's read the introduction. In your typical React application state is passed down, passed top down, parent to children via props. But this can become cumbersome quickly, especially when those props are required by many components across your application. However, with the introduction of React Context or Context API, you no longer have to pass props down from component to component. What React devs call prop drilling, we can now store data on a context object and retrieve that data in the necessary components from context object, not props. So basically, we did a lot of props, and I'll do the drawings and stuff like that. We passed a lot of props around. Some of you got it, some of you were confused about the props, how is it being passed, all that stuff. So now we're moving away from props, because props, if you have multiple components that are nested, it's going to be really difficult to manage so many props. Okay, so let's do a quick drawing of kind of like a React application. So React application usually, sorry, let me undo that. React application usually, this is the main parent. So this would be something like app.js. Sorry about the writing, just I'm using my mouse. And then you have multiple components that are kind of like connected to it. So here you might have something like shopping, you might have like maybe a form here. So, and then these have their own components that are connected to them. So let's say if this is shopping, this would be like a shopping list. And this would be maybe like a shopping cart, something like that. And here the form could have like maybe another one where you can manage like the sign up, the login, things like that. So if you want to, let's say, so the state usually, so the state is the data, the information that you want to pass. So let's say the product list. So let's say this is a shopping application, shopping app, and your products live here in app.js. They live right here. So the product list. So they live right here. So if you want to send those products to a shopping list, you have to use something called, you have to use props, right? You have to use props or properties to send those the shopping list or the products to a shopping list. And then shopping list has to use props to send, let's say, if you want to show the product in, let's say here is your shopping cart or something like that, you have to show your products in the shopping cart. Then you have to use props again to pass it down. Now, if you move the products to shopping list here, if you move the state, so this is the state. If you move the state to shopping list, you're not going to have access to it in here in the form. Let's say you're not going to have access to it here, right? Because you cannot pass state across. You cannot pass it across. You can only pass it down. You can only pass it down. So there's a limit there. So every time you're trying to use a state, when it comes to props, using props, you always have to put it at the top of of your component, like the top component. You have to put it there. So that's sometimes if you have multiple applications, I mean multiple components, then it's going to be really difficult to manage props. So that's where we're at right now. We want to move away from props and use something that's a little more easier to use. Let's say you have the state here, let's say, but you don't want to go, you don't need it in here, you just need it here, right? Then there is a way to do it, and that's a context API. Maybe let me use a different color. Context API is the reason. What am I doing? That's a fill line color. Okay, so context is is how we use. It's called context. Is how we pass data without using the props. So we can just go from the app.js to this app without passing it through other apps, right? That is the main importance of context. There are other ways to manage data. And this is you could call this like a global state management. You could call that. People don't use that. They use it more of like, there's two categories of state management. One category is you use component level. I think somebody is not muted. Yeah, please, you can mute. So there's two ways to manage state. One is, it's called component level. So I'm not sure if I can write it down here, but okay. Component level. So one is component level. So I'll say C level, component level, which is props. Props are component level. Context API is also component level, but it's somewhere between component level and global level. A fully global solution for managing state would be Redux, which we will learn. Redux. This is a fully global. Basically, the whole state is outside of all the components. Redux, basically, you only send a request to the state, and to the data, and then that's how you manage the state. It's not hosted any of the components. But when it comes to props you have to put the state in the top level, the highest level of your components, which is usually app.js. Context API is a little bit different. You could put it in any app, in any component, and then mostly you put it in the app.js. And then after that, you use something called provider and consumer. So there's two methods that you'll be using, provider and we'll get into it. So in general, that's the concept you need to understand when it comes to managing state, is that props are limited. There's something called prop drill. So there's a prop drill. It's a thing. Prop drill is when you have so many components and you're passing props through all of them. You're basically drilling the state through all those components, and that can become really, really difficult to manage. If you have a very limited app with like 3 or 4 components, then it's easy to use props. But if you have a application with, let's say, over 20, 30 components, all doing different things, some are connected, some are not connected, then it will be really difficult to use props. You will make a lot of mistakes. And also it's unnecessary, because every time you call a prop, then all the components that has that prop, they have to be rendered in the memory, and that can also lead to slow application. Okay, so let's go to the website, React website, where they explain what context is. Now they changed it to context. It used to be context API. Context provides a way to pass data through component tree without having to pass props down manually at every level. In typical React application, data is passed top down. So this is what we read in our beginning. But such usage can be cumbersome for certain types of props. Okay, that are required by many components within the application. Context provides a way to share values like these between the components without having to explicitly pass a prop through every level of the tree. Okay, so here is what we need to read. We need to read before you use context. Context is primarily used when some data needs to be accessed by many components at different nesting levels. Apply it sporadically because it makes component reuse more difficult. If you only want to avoid passing some props through many levels, component composition. Okay, so this is a different topic. But basically what they're saying here is be careful, because once you basically apply context into a component, it's very difficult to reuse that component. So that's a one warning. Let's see what else they have here that's important. Yeah, I mean, there is also a legacy API where we will maybe visit that today. Okay, so that's generally what we need to know. So you guys understand in general what context API is used for, props, what is used for, and you have some idea of what the two types of state management, which is a component level and global level, where global level you use Redux, and component level you use props and context API or context. So let's get into our project today. I need to move my Zoom. Okay, so let's get back to here. Okay, so context is, so here it says context is a great tool to simplify state management. We will see how it helps us to manage state easier as our apps begin to scale. All right, this is just some more information that you could read. So today what we're gonna do is, inshallah, we're gonna build this app. Right now the app is using props. Let me zoom it in. It's using props. It's a family tree. So the app is using props now, and then we're gonna convert it to context. So it's basically just a family thing, a family tree. So we have like the presidents. So here's Obama and his children, and also if you say Reagan and the Reagan, his wife and their children, and then you have a Kennedy, the Kennedy family. Okay, so basically it's just a family tree of these people. All right. Now, okay. So now let's see an actual code of this application. So the code starts with. Let me zoom it in. So we don't actually need we don't need to see because it's already open somewhere else. The code starts with app.js, and even before app.js, let's check the data. Data is just an array, object of an array. So it's a nested objects. So we have data, and we have family name, and then we have parents here, and then also we have children. Then we're gonna go and we have the next family. So we're not calling any API anything, and that's how the data looks like. We also have app.js, which has we're not gonna write the props version of this application from scratch because it's gonna take a while. But we'll convert it to a context API. So this one we just importing the family tree. This is the data. No, this is not the data. This is the data, and we're creating this component, and then we have two states. One state is for the families, and we don't need any, we don't need to set it. You could use a set, but we're not going to be using it. We also have another state that the text care which family is active. So when I say which family is active, I mean when we look at here, so which family are we actually looking at right now? And then in the body of the application or the app.js, we have the title, which is right here, and we're rendering we're mapping over the state. So families, we're mapping over them. We have a button. So what are we mapping over is the name of the families, right? So we created a button, and then inside that button, we're basically creating a condition and saying if the family is active, then set the data to that family. So in this button, you see here we have a class. This class, we have this family button class. So this is from the CSS. But then we're saying basically if the family name is equal to the active family name. So now the active family name is the first family, right? If they're equal to the active family, then make it so that it's the data of that family is rendered, so, right, like that. And then we're basically saying every time we click any of the names of the families, then just render their information that way. Okay, so don't worry about the functionality. The importance is understanding how it works. So so we have a button here, and this button basically takes care of the clicking. So every time we click, then it sets it changes this number to like 1, 2, or 0, right? That's all it does. And then we're just rendering the family data right here. So we're rendering the family name, I mean, not the data. Okay. Then we're saying, okay, if the family, if we have a family here, if we have an active family, then render this component right here. So we're saying we have the family active. If that's true, an active family, and then render that family here. So we pass in a prop here to this component. So this prop is the active family, right? All we change it is this number, right? So this is the app.js. We have 3 other components. One is family tree. So this family tree is receiving a props, and then it's displaying the parents. So the parents is a component right here, and it's also showing it's passing also props here. We also have the children, and it's also passing the props. Now, if we check the parents, you'll see that we're looping over the props that we just received, and we just rendering the family, the parents' names, right? And also the children are the same. We received the props, and we're mapping over their names and images, right? So that's the application. I think the only confusing part is this part. We could simplify it, but all it does, the functionality is basically switching the families, right? Okay. Any questions so far about the setup before we dive into changing it?
The D, is that came from the data?
The D came from here. It's basically each item, right? Remember how every time we do the mapping, you have to have an item for each thing that we're mapping over. So you could name this then like an item. It doesn't matter. Item, and you just have to change it everywhere. So we change in here, item, and right here too. So it doesn't matter what you call it. It's just each family. Basically, the D stands for the family. Okay, item. Right. So so we can name it anything. I could actually say just family. So families, and then this is a family, just one family. So let's replace item to family. Family, 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 and family. Okay. So it's each family, we're mapping over each family, and then we're basically saying if the name of the family is equal to the active name of the family. So whenever the active family name is equal to the family name we selected, then after that, we're saying basically set the family, we're setting the family data to the active state. So this active state. So this active state is what basically showing the family data, right? And the families, this one is just carrying the data so we can map over it, right? So families, we just map over it already. And then after that, we're using active family to render each family into the UI. Okay. So after we make sure the family that we're passing and the active family are exactly the same, then we're saying, okay, then go ahead and pass the data of the active family to this component family tree, right? So in the assignment, you don't have to do all this. This is just for me to make it easier for me, so we can convert things easier. But mainly all we're doing is just we're comparing what we have, what are we clicking here to the data we have here. That's all we're doing. Any other question? Okay, so you guys already know props, right? You understand props, how to pass them. You understand what they stand for. You know what do you do with them? So now we have family here, which is the props, and then we pass it to a family tree, and family tree here, and then we just basically passing these props to two components, this component and this component. And then after that, we mapping over them. That's basically what we're doing. So let's start with app.js and start converting it to And before we do that, let's read a little bit more about the context API and where it came from. Context API. Let's see. There was an article that I saw that was really good explanation. Introduction context API. This website is always good. They can explain things really nice. I like the Medium articles, but the problem is that sometimes you have to pay for it. But yeah, I would say maybe if you don't understand the context API, watch maybe a couple of YouTube videos of what it is. It's very useful, especially if you're building a simple React app. Mainly that's the goal of context API. Usually, how do I choose between props, context API, and Redux? Okay, so let's say I'm actually building an application right now. It's a React native application, but it's same as React. So the way I choose it is, how do I want to like display my state? How many places do I need to display my state? So if my state is basically intertwined in everything in the application, then I want to use Redux. If my state is basically, I use it in like maybe less than 50% or 40% of the components, then I use context API. If there is no use for mostly state, maybe 2-3 components that need a state, then I use props. So usually in real world applications, I don't use props. The reason for that is because I have way more than like 3 or 4 components. Usually you break things down, different components. So I usually go to context API. Then when I see like my state is getting out of control, that I have to send the data to maybe more than 10 components, then that's when I kind of go back and say, okay, maybe I need to use Redux. So, evaluating that is really important, and making sure that you understand when to use context API, props, or Redux. And we will get to Redux, and you guys will see how amazing, also hard the Redux is. So Redux, will get to it, and it's one of the things that we'll learn in this class. So Redux is our third, third lesson. So yeah, so that's context API. I think we should take a break so that we can get this going. I think once we start converting to context API, then it could be difficult to kind of stop. So we'll take a quick break, and then we'll get back to it, and then we'll just get started and finish it, inshallah. So I'll see.
Yeah, can you share? Hello.
Oh, you wanted me to share the?
Oh yeah, I was trying to.
Okay, let me share.
Take a look at it.
Sure, no problem. Let me share that. Oh yeah, so also, there's a good question that was. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think it's the same question.
Yeah, so Mohammed asks, can I mix props and context API? Yes, you can. So you could mix. So you could say, okay, let's see, there's a component here. You want to pass some data to it. You could use props, and then there's another component. You could use context API, and we'll see how to use context API. You don't have to pass it like this. You can pass it a different way. But the good thing is you don't have to pass through something else. So let's say if your component, so family tree is showing two components, you don't have to, when it comes to context API, you don't have to pass through the props here. You could just go straight to parent and just show your state here. So you could mix and match when it comes to context API and props. But when we get to Redux, you cannot do that. Redux is basically, it takes over everything. So it changes how the whole state is managed. So you cannot, like, you cannot, I mean, you could try to use some components for context API, let's say, but Redux is a whole system, and it needs to, like, maybe set up in a good way so that everything works together. Otherwise you could have problems. But yeah, when it comes to context and props, they work together. I think the context is basically an advanced version of I'll say props. Let's see. So we can actually look for here context API with props. There's so many places that people talking about this. But yeah, I actually did use a context API with props, so there was no problem with that. Any other question? Any other questions so far? And hopefully you understand the general idea of what how it works, so that you understand, like, where we're going. The main thing is just to understand, okay, how it works, and then, like, the practical part of it. I mean, when I say how, I mean, why are we using context API instead of, like, props? Then after that, it's just very easy to use when it comes to practicality. Okay. Any other question? Are all family data stored in one data file? Yes. So all the family data is stored in here. So we're using this data file to render that data, and the images are just from the internet. So, and we're sending it here. We're importing it, and then after that we're setting it to state. And then we're saying every active family, we're starting it with the first family, the 0 family. And then we're saying every time we change the page or the button, then render different family according to the name. So if the name are exactly the same, then basically make it active, basically make that family active.
What the part it says class name, where's that coming from?
So class name is so this is basically, it's changing the button color. So now when you click this button, it's a different color, and when you click this one, it's a different color. So this is basically saying change the button's class right here it's saying change to buttons class. The default is family button. And then it's saying if, let's say, if the family name in the state and the active family name are exactly the same, then it's saying add a class called active. And that's the class called active. So when we actually look at the CSS, the one that has the color has the class name active. So now if we actually zoom in a little bit, you see here, it says active here, and that's the one that's clicked. So if we click another one, let's get out of it. If we click another one, you see that it changes the active to another one, right? So it moves the active. So that this is like a condition, basically. This is a JavaScript condition. And don't worry about this key thing, because it's actually, it's gonna give us like a warning if we don't have the key, but it's not necessarily like it's gonna give us a warning key. And then we have an onClick function where we're basically setting the family, the active family to the current family that we clicked. So basically, like this button, whatever family that we click, the name. So if the name is Obama, then set the state to set the active family to Obama, and that's the data it's going to show. And every time we click, let's say Kennedy, then if the name Kennedy is the same as the name of the component, then set that component to active and show that component basically. So this is the onClick is basically changing the family to the family that we clicked. So, and then after that, it's just show this is, and this family, that family name is just the name. So this name, we could actually change it here, something, and then you will see that it changes test, and all of them change to test, as you can see. And if we click now, it changes because this is just a showing. It has nothing to do with the condition. So now if we say here, Obama, and let's actually go back to the way this was, and we change this to Obama, then the other families will not show. So the only family that will show is Obama. If we click the other family, it actually shows the other family. Okay. Oh, I mean the other way around. Okay. We set this to Obama. Okay. It is shown. Okay. I think that the main thing is this is just basically the button, the CSS for the button. The main condition for this one is the CSS for the button. And here it's just basically changing the family. So switching the families depending on what you clicked, what family you clicked, right? So, and this family, it's coming from here. So it's coming from right here. So it's each family. So it's changing each family. It's kind of like looping through each family. So we could have used a better way of setting it up, but I didn't have time to change it. I actually wanted to change this method, but I think you're not going to see this again. It's just mainly, it's just the statics, the UI. Yeah, so don't worry about it. The main thing is just we're sending the data to this family tree component, and that's how it's displaying. So we're passing props through. Okay. Any other question? It's the same as JS class list. Is the same. You mean the class name? Do you mean the class name?
Yeah.
Oh, the class name is just it's just a class, basically the CSS class, like that. But in JavaScript, especially in React, in all JavaScript, you have, instead of just saying class, you say the class name, because class, the word class is already preserved for the class, basically the JavaScript class. So you have to say class name. So this is just basically CSS. As you can see here, it has here too. and it's rendering header, which is part of the CSS. So if we go to CSS, we can find header right here, header.
I mean, like a toggle list and class list. So when you trying to switch between classes,
Oh,
or
okay.
they just okay.
Yeah, so we're switching between active or false, basically. So it's either active or not. So yeah, you could say it in that way. It's similar to class list, but this one is just we're using condition inside the class name, right? So we're using JavaScript condition, and we're using template literal, as you can see here, using template literal to render the data. As you can see here, this is our template literal right here. So that's the condition we're using. We either add in active or we remove an active and just setting it to false. That's what it shows here. We go to here. So this one is the first one is active, and then the second is active, and the third one is active. So any other question so far? All right. Okay, let's take a break and then get back to it and then change to context API so that we can, see the exactly how it's used. So let's take a 10-minute break and then get back to it. Okay, soo laabta insha Allah. Waxaan ku fikirayay in aan completely actually waqti waa haysana aan ku bedelno kana u bedelno maxaa la dhihi jiray aan isticmaalno routing. What do you guys think? Should we change this completely to routing? Kuwaan aan ka dhigno caadi links aan ka dhigaynaa kadibna waxaan ka dhigaynaa mid kasta waxaan u sameynaynaa their own route. So I mean waa samayn karnaa saas isna aad uma adko. So laakiin waxay noqonaysaa markaas waa maybe we don't have I don't have anything ii qoran or routes ku saabsan. So we have to start from scratch and add the routes and all that. What do you guys think? It's a good idea, bad idea? Si idinkugu fududay adinka u aragtaan, we could also use routes instead of method can. So
I think this one is okay, man.
So routes waxay noqon kartaa waqti nagu qaadan kartaa, or we could just quickly finish it whatever way. But haddaa kan oo ka yara fahantay journal muhiimadda waxaa waa just basically waa version of routing camal waaye routingka la sameynayo. Conditional isticmaalna si aan routingka u sameyno meeshii aan routekii isticmaali lahayn oon soo gelin lahayn indexka aan soo gelin lahayn everywhere and then aan isticmaali lahayn route link and switch and then mid kasta aan ku xiri lahayn each component. So children component aan ku xirinaa and then we render the children and then we hal component kul isku geynina and that's how we render family component family tree. But can that fantin inshallah no problem, we can move on. Okay, so now let's convert waxaan dhan to context API. And so context API marka haddaan rabno inaan isticmaalno waxaan u baahana marka hore inaan soo xareyno. Context API waxay ku jirtaa ama context reactive ku jirtaa. So meeshaan ka soo xareynaynaa waxaan leenahay create context. Right? Methodkaas aan isticmaalaynaa create context la dhaho. So now create context waa noo taalaa waa in aan sameyno variable inaan sameyno. So meeshaan gudaha imaanaynaa. So maybe after the state camal waxaan leenahay const family waxaan leenahay family context is equal to create context function. Okay, so let's understand create context function ka wuxuu yahay cancel loo garayno family context aan dhahno. Okay, save aan leenahay. Let's go back to here. Intaan tegaynaa. Let's look at it. So it's right here, this one waaye. So let's open it. So methodyo badanaa ku jiro. And as you can see, waa typeka waxa weeye waa react context. Waxaan ujeednaa consumer iyo waxaan ujeednaa provider. Consumer iyo provider waa labada wax oo ugu muhiimsan markii noqoto context API-ga. Waana ku arki doontaan meelo kale xataa wuxuu ku jiraa redux uu ku jiraa consumer iyo maxaa la jiray provider. I don't know why it's not. Okay. Waxaa kaloo jira methodyaal kale halkan ku yaallo badanaa markaa aragtid method oo calaamadaas underscore kale luqado kalena sidoo kale waaye luqadaha programmingka sidoo kale waaye. Micnaheedu waxaa laga wadaa waa private method waaye ama private function laga wadaa. So haddii aragtid calaamadaas underscoreka ka horeyso xaraf micnaheedu waxay private u yihiin methodkan micnaha banaanka lagama isticmaali karo. laakiin muhiimadana waxaa waaye waa consumerka iyo providerka. I don't know why it's taking forever to switch, but labadaas aan isticmaalina. Okay, so let's go back to here. The first thing u baahana waxaa waaye marka badanaa markii aad isticmaalaysid context API waxaa u baahan tahay meesha aragtid inaad datada ka qaado. So stateka meeshuu yaallo ayaa waxaa sameynaysaa waxaa gelinaysaa provider. So componentiga hadda app.js state nagu jira waa kana statekanagii waxaan rabnaa inaan u dirno family tree wuxuu sii diraysaa kuwa kale saas oo ay props marka la isticmaalayo. Laakiin ma rabno in aan basically ma rabno inaan si u dirno props. So waxaan sameynaynaa horta marka hore componentiga dhana waxaan ku xireynaa context API provider. So provider can gelinayna. So let's do that. So intaan gelinayna provider. So waxaa leedahay family context dot provider aa leedahay, and then waan xiri karnaa like that. Let's close it like let's close it like this, and then we have to close it somewhere underneath. So right here waxaan leenahay family context dot provider. So intaan aan ku furnay, intaan aan ku xirnay. So micnaheeda hadda waxaa waaye, this means it is it's rendering we're rendering the context API in this component. So this component is accepting the context API. Now, when we go somewhere else, we could use the provider, and the provider gives the consumer gives us the data from this component. So now we didn't actually pass any data through the context API, which is this family context is right here. So we didn't provide any data. So there's something that context API uses called value. So this is already built in inside the context API. I think if we do console log again, you will see that value. This is basically whatever you want to provide, the data that you want to provide. Sometimes you could use, let's say, you could use objects, you could use arrays, different things. So usually you pass the state in the value. So let's pass the state, which is the active family. So each active family that we're using. So we pass that there. Now, if we use the consumer, then the active family data is going to be available for us, right? So that's it for basically creating the provider. It's that simple. It's just basically importing the context, the API, the create context, and then setting it to a variable. And then after that, setting up this provider, giving a value of your state, right? The state that you want to show. You want to kind of like send it to other components. So save this. It should not show anything now. The first thing we need to do before we do anything else is remove the props, because we're not going to be using any props. So we're going to remove the props. That's going to break the app, of course, right? So we remove the props. Now, the complaint is family tree. It's complaining. So let's go to family tree. Family tree is expecting props, right? It's saying, okay, where are the props that I was supposed to receive? So we're not gonna give it props. We're gonna use something called use context. So remember we said here create context, and now in this component we're saying use context, and this is from React basically. So right in here in the function, we're gonna say const. We're gonna create a new variable. We're gonna say const. We're gonna call it like family, and then say use context. So use context is asking us for a information. It's asking us for where is the context that I'm going to be using. So we already created that in app.js. So this is the context. This is the context we're going to be using. So, and even before we do that, we have to export this. So we have to say export, right? I think it's export default. No. Oh, we have to do it outside of the component, right? Do outside the component. Okay, export. So we're exporting that because the component is already exported, the app.js component. So we're exporting that. Now we could use it in other components. So now we said that, and then we put here family context, right? Exactly how it's written here. Where is it? Exactly how we wrote here. Sometimes make sure your spelling is correct. And also we have to import, of course. So let's import that. Import. We're gonna do destructuring, or because it's not a named component. So this is by itself is kind of like a component, but it's not named. So all we're doing is just we're destructuring. So we're going to say family context and from app.js. App.js, so we have to say that, and we have to go up. It's right here. Okay, save. So now we have family here, but the problem is it's not used yet. Let's actually console log. We still have a problem with this, so let's actually remove this for now. Let's just call it test, right? And this is going to give us error, so we don't know what to pass here. But let's see if we can console log family. All right. So still giving us, okay, family is right here. So family, we have the family that was selected, right? Because remember we passed in here in app.js, we passed a the family that's active, the active family. So by default, the active family is the Obama family. So we have the parents here and their name and image, and we have the children, their name and image, right? So we're passing things correctly. Now the complaint is children and parent because they're asking us for data, and we didn't give it to the didn't give the data. If we want to pass here we're passing the title for the family name. So all we have to do is we say family, which is what we just created, and then we say family name. Family name, which is in the data. So it's right here. Family name is right here. Right. So we pass in family name. Right now we have the parents and the children. We're not using props, so we're removing props. Remove props. Right. Still, it's going to show us error. Right. So we're not using any props, so we're good here. Now, the next thing is we need to pass we don't even need these props to, so still giving us error. So now we can use the same method to grab the data. So that was easy. This is called the use context hook. This is the new way of actually grabbing the data from context API, and it's pretty simple. All you have to do is just import what you exported, create a new variable, and pass the data, and that's it. And then you could just use this as like your anchor. It could be an object. So if it's an object, you have to, of course, loop through it. Otherwise, you could just basically create that. But there's older way of doing it, right? There's older way of doing it, and it's called the older way of doing it is called render props. So there is a render props. We could say context API render props, right? And render props. Okay, so render out props is the older way of doing it, and we can see it. Let's see example of it. We can actually just build it. I'm just looking for something a little bit better that I can show you before we get into it. Render props, the context API. Okay, so all right, let's move on. We could actually just basically build our own. Forget it. Oh yeah, so this is the render props that I was talking about. No, this is use provider. Okay, yeah, this is the render props. You use a consumer. So, but let's actually build our own. So let's actually use the parents to do that. So this is the older way of doing it, right? So still we have to import the data, the context API data, right? We import that, and we don't import use context because we're not using use context. So this is the way we're doing right now. You actually see this in applications right now. So you see a lot of applications using this because people are not used to the use context. hook. So use context hook is kind of new way of doing it. I just wanted to show you so that you will think that use context is like the default way of doing it, but it's the easier way of doing it now. Before maybe like a year or two, we had to use render props to render the data, and you will see how difficult it is. It's not that difficult, but it is kind of like confusing. So to do that, so we import the data, and then inside here, we will create a function. Before we create the function, let's actually bring the consumer. So we say family. We say family context. Family context. I think that's how it is. Yeah, family context dot consumer right here. Family text context dot consumer, and then we close it with it. Family context dot consumer. Okay, and we have to close it. So this is similar to what we did in app.js, which is the provider, but now we're using the consumer, right? This is the older way of doing it. So we don't usually use the consumer, we use the use context now. Now it's not gonna work here because we have to create a function before we render the data, this data. So we have to create a function here. So let's create a function. So this function, we can call it whatever. We're gonna call it like family. So let's say function. We could also use the arrow function. It's not a big deal. The same thing. Let's call it family. I mean the function name, not that. Family. And here we're gonna render. So the reason why we need to use an arrow function is because we need to show this too. So instead of this, we can remove that. So let's use arrow function. So let's just say family, and it's an anonymous arrow function. Let's say family. Okay, and use these brackets, and then just close it up here. Let's add one more here, right? So now we need to add one more thing here. We need to add something called, we could add like a div or something like that, but let's add something called it's called React fragment. I think we used before, but I'm not sure if you guys know it. It's just basically an empty like div, basically. That's what it is. So React fragment is like that, and you could close it here. And I think it's closing like that. It's like an empty div, basically. It's actually outside here. Okay. I don't know where this is coming from. Okay. No, it's actually between. Okay, I was right. So it's between here, but then we have to close it, right? So we have the function here, family, and now we have the fragment, and then also we have another here. So here props is gonna go away. We have to, because we have the fragment, which is basically JSX, we have to put another JavaScript bracket here. So, and then we have to close that too. All right, so let's close that too. And the way we close it is we have two parentheses and one bracket, and here we can have two, and just like that. All right, actually one. All right, so now here, basically what we did is we created this consumer, and then we created a function. That function renders all this JSX for us. And then basically we're passing family, and then we say family dot parents, and then we map it over. So this should show the family. In theory, It's not going to show because the children is not correct. But this is the older way of doing it, right? You have to create a function inside. I was always confused about this when I was learning. Why do we need to pass a function, all that stuff? But this is how the consumer works. You have to pass a function, and then inside the function, you have to return a JSX, right? This is basically the return is omitted, so we don't see the return here, but there is a return here just like this, and we're returning this data, this JSX that we're mapping over. So that's the older way of doing it. So let's move to children and then use the use context, and then basically we're gonna have our application working. We don't need props. We need to import, of course, the family context here. And we need to use use context. Use context. And then inside here, we just need to map over. We need to create a variable here before we do anything. Let's call it context. Let's call it children. And then say use context, and then pass the family context. So we did this in the parent, when we were doing the family tree, I mean. And all we need to do now is just basically map over that. The only thing is we just need to change this to something like value or something like that, like data, because it's going to be children. So let's change this to value. All right. So now we save it and things should go back to normal. All right. Things should go back to normal. So as you can see, this is way simpler. The older way of doing it is so confusing that the React team said they don't want to deal with it anymore, so they got rid of it. So now we're using the context API, the use context hook, and all we need to do is just grab our context and pass it anywhere we want. The good thing about this is you don't have to use any props, so you could just pass this data anywhere in your app, in your components, so you don't have to worry about passing anything, any props. So this really saves a lot of time. Any question so far? Any questions? Oh, sorry, Mohammed, can you hear me? I was actually muted. And I'm not sure how long my Zoom stopped. What was the last thing you guys hear from me?
Sorry, man. We can hear you well. You were talking about if we have any question.
Oh, okay, so that's good. Okay, I thought I lost you guys a while back. Okay, my Zoom just stopped and came back. I'm not sure. I think it was my internet. Would it be easier if we start the whole project from scratch?
From scratch. Sometimes if I don't understand, there's a lot of little details that sometimes I need to understand. So I was kind of, if you have the project, if you have the project on the other monitor and you just copy it from there by writing.
Yeah, we could do that. We could also start something smaller project. We could use another application.
Oh yeah. Definitely, yeah.
So let's find another example. We have some time. Let's find another example and kind of like redo it with basically context API. So let me just conclude this one. This part is confusing, I know. but the main thing you need to understand is you have to provide a consumer and then create a function, and inside that function return a context, return a JSX, and then that's how you render the data within that JSX. I mean, all this could be basically just a normal function that returns JSX. So you basically render in a JSX within the JSX. That's confusing. But the easier way is this way, just using use context and then showing the data like that. Any question before we find another? Yeah, go ahead.
Let's say if you have a couple components, like right now, so you can use like use context for all of them and just don't worry about the old way.
Yeah. Yeah, you can use context and then just pass the data that you need. You don't have to use any props. So you just out of the blue basically use context. You put it here, and then you create a value. You create basically an variable, put the data in it, and then whatever data you want, you could extract from it, and just sort of show it like that. Right? It's that easy. Any other question? Okay, let's
So,
go. Yeah,
is
go
this,
ahead.
the context API, is it part of the Redux, or is it its own part of a third-party library?
The context API is part of React. So the React team actually created this. So if
React or Redux? The Redux is Redux is different from context API. So
yeah. So Redux is different. Redux is not part of React. So Redux is somebody else created Redux. So if you go to Redux, you see that the Redux JS here is completely different website, and you could actually use it for other systems like Angular and Vue and even basic JavaScript project. You can use Redux. You don't have to use it for React. But context is part of is a React way of saying, okay, let's do maybe a better way of managing state instead of the props, right? So when they created the props, people were like, okay, that's nice, but I don't want to use Redux, which is the third-party system. And do you guys have something a little bit better than props? And then they said, okay, we have a simpler version of Redux, and it's actually completely different than Redux. This is context compared to Redux is basically like comparing a kid's toy of a rocket to actual rocket, right? Or kid's toy of a car to actual car, because Redux is completely bigger than the context API. You actually have to learn by itself. It's actually a system of the whole thing. It's a framework by itself. So context is way simpler, especially if you're doing a simple application. Context is much simpler. Okay. So yeah, context is it's created by React, and it's built in. That's why we're using it as just a prop right here from React. As you can see here, we're getting it from React, saying use context, and in here we're saying create context from React. So it's part of React, and you don't have to download any. You don't have to install any dependencies for it. Let's create a simpler application from scratch. Let's think about an example.
Now, quick question.
Ah.
You know, so like context, is it considered like global level or the other level? I don't remember which channel.
Yeah, it's component level and global level, right?
Yeah, which level is going to be considered context? I know you said before, but
it's somewhere in the middle. It's a component level in the sense that we're actually you have to pass it through. You have to send it to a component. It's not a standalone like Redux. You have to create its own system for it. So you create a folder and create a different files for Redux, and then that way the whole state is managed there instead of different components. But when it comes to context, we're putting it inside a component. As you can see here, it's inside the app.js, and if we want to use it, it's inside here. So you could say it's a component level, but in a sense, it's also global, where you don't have to. If we create a like a nested system here, like we create a, let's say something like let's grandchildren or something like that, grand that folder, and then put another files here, grandchildren, children.js, and inside here we put grandchildren or something like that. Then you don't have to nest anything. You could just jump it to whatever. Actually, let me just draw that. It's easier to draw things than explain. So delete, restart the whole thing. So yeah, so we don't have to. So we have a app.js here, which has the context API, context, and we have a bunch of other components that connected to this. And all of them, they have their own nested components. And these have their own nested components, and they're all nested like that. Instead of just passing things through, you could just jump from here to here, right? Like that. By using, you use here create context, and then you use provider to wrap around the data that you're trying to send, provider. And in here, in this component, you use context hook, right? Use context, and then you create a variable and set to use context, and then grab the data that you actually provided with the provider. So provider, you have to give it a value all the time. You have to give it a value. So you take that value, whatever you store it in that value, and you put it inside here, the value. And that way, this component knows what data you pass through here. So it's like a wireless way of passing the state. So it's really very useful when it comes to doing this. When it comes to passing state. Any other question?
I was gonna ask. So this option, if you try to use props, you don't have this option of passing, the data without going through the nested components.
What do you mean?
Like, you see how you jump from the top component to the nested component?
Yeah.
And the provider, the context API makes it easier for you to do that, right?
Yes.
Yes. My question was, did you have the same option? Can you do the same thing using props?
No. So props.
Okay.
So once you declare props here, so you have props here.
Yeah.
You pass props here. You have to have a component. You have to name the component. So this would be the component, and then you pass a prop. Then that component has to be connected to this. So it has to be this one or this one or this one. It cannot be this one. So now, if you want to go to this one, you have to say, okay, I'm going to pass it to this one. So this would be the props. And then this, you tell this one to pass it to this one. That's the only way. All right. So props,
okay, so you don't have that shortcut of not you going through. It lets you skip or jump from one. Okay.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, you definitely cannot jump. I mean, you could say, okay, I want to pass from this component to this component. But let's say if you need to render this component in here, so let's say this is the parent, like we did here, family, right? Family has to render parents and children, right? If we render just parents by itself, we could pass the data from app.js to parents, but you're not going to see the children. So you're not going to see the family together. You're just gonna see
Oh, okay.
you're gonna see the family in one place, and you're gonna see just children in one place. They're not gonna be on top of each other like this, like this way. So
Okay.
it just depends on how you want to display your data. Any other question? Okay, let's find a simpler, maybe a straightforward example. I'm gonna look for, okay, let's see what we can do. Something we can all understand. Let's use something like, because we have the presidents here and stuff, let's use like the government, okay? So the government, it goes from the president to the governor. So it's the president gives the orders to the governors, and the governors do give order to like the officials and lower people, lower than the governor. So let's create something like that. We're not going to use any images or anything like that. We're just going to create a simple. So let's code sandbox and create a basic React app here. We're going to keep it really simple. And just use names. Okay. So in here, let's create the components here. And so we have to pass a data. So let's create a data here. And not there. In here, let's create a data.js. It would be nice if we have something already prepared for us.
I mean, you can make a simple object.
Yeah, simple object would be fine. Let's see. We have here this data. I'm just looking how it's nested. So
Okay.
we have object, the main object, and we could say this one is we could say this is the president, and then we could say this is the government. No, let's say because the president would be like only one thing, so we need maybe like two things.
So we
Let's
should,
I mean, I'll
Okay.
say copy one object here, nested object here with the data within,
yeah.
and then just one object here, and then we're gonna modify it, add one, and copy itself.
Yeah, let's do that. So we can call it just the data. So let's say export default data. No, it's not default. It's const default const data. It's equal to like that. Okay. And then here we're just gonna call it president. And let's call it this. Let's actually make this one. And the children will be like the governors, basically. So this would be government, actually. Government. This would be president. And let's just call it Obama. I don't care. It's fine. It will be governors. How do you spell governors? Like that. It should correct me. I usually just Google the word.
Oh, governor. Oh, yeah.
Like that. Okay, governors. Governors. That's how it is. Okay, so governors. Yeah, we could call it whatever here. It's fine. Let's grab like some governors. Like let's say Minnesota governor. Okay. Whatever his name is. I'll put it here. Let's say Ohio governor, because that's where you guys at. Actually, we needed a picture too. That's fine. Let's copy the name. What's wrong with this name?
Okay. Yeah, that's his name.
Name. Let's grab his image. Copy image. Okay, close this. So this would be and I have to make it so that it's not showing the navigation. Okay, it's fine. Okay. And then the other governor's picture, copy image. That should work. Now this one here. It's safe. Now it's not rendering anywhere, so we need to kind of render it. Maybe let's use the same CSS, I guess. It'd be easier for us. So let's change that. Let's change this to SCSS. Save. I'm not sure, some kid is crying. Okay, so now here we can use similar setup, but we can get rid of this, so we don't need this part. Let's actually get rid of it almost. We just need like this header part. We just need the CSS, that's it. All right, so let's change this to that. But then we also need to render the state. So let's grab this state only on the data instead of us typing everything from scratch. We need to import the data and also the CSS. Okay. Save that. See magic. Okay, I don't know why it's saying that. Okay, so this should actually refresh. This shows the error. That's good. SCSS. So change this to, where's the SCSS? Okay, use state, import use state. So this is the thing about like starting things from scratch. It's like there's so many little things that you have to account for. But it's fine with me. I usually like starting things from scratch. So React. Okay. Family context, that doesn't exist. So let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this. And let's get rid of all this for now, because we don't need to use that thing. Okay, we need like the section part. Section. Okay, so instead of family tree, this would be government. Okay. All right, so it's cute, but we'll go with it. So now, okay, so now we have the data, we have the state. We want to render the data. So we want to send it to other components. So what do we need to do is we just need to create here components. Let's create a component called, let's call it government.js. Let's create another one called, let's call it governors.js. I think that's the spelling. I'm not 100% sure. So it's governors like that. So let's change that. Governors. And let's add another one called president.js. Okay. So now we're just going to pass our data to government, and then government is going to have, just similar to the family tree, it's going to have the data. So so we're just going to pass our data here. We're going to import government. We need to import here. The thing is, we're not going to have any navigation, so that's fine. we're not gonna have any different governments. So import from components and then government. All right. So okay. So now we're showing this here, but we need to pass the data here. So we need to pass the data using using context. So we need to create a context here. So we say here, create context, right? And instead of family here, this would be government. We could call it government data just to make sure it's not same. And remember that we could actually just use here set government data. But if you're never going to use a set, you don't have to actually declare that. So now here, if we're using props, we're actually going to pass the props here, but we're not using props. So we have to declare right here at the before the component, we have to say export const, and then here say something like government. Let's say government context, right? Usually when you're trying to create a context variable, always have whatever you're working on and then context, right? So that you know exactly whatever you pass later on, if you have multiple components, this variable is actually the context, you know, it's not, it's carrying the data. So we say create context, and then in here, we pass the data, right? So just like we did here. No, actually we don't pass anything. Okay, never mind. So we create the variable, and now we could actually create the provider here. So just like we created a provider here, we can just pass the family here instead of active family. So let's do that. So in here, right before section is where we're gonna say, we're gonna say govern. We're gonna say, I think we're gonna say government, right? Because we need to use the same variable. So let's close this actually. So let's say government context dot provider. Keep in mind that we have to use provider where we have the data, and we have to pass a value here, and the value would be the state, right? So value is equal to the state, which is government data. Okay. This is the state right here. I'm gonna close this, and now we have to close it here. So I think you guys understand it so far. Let me know if something is not making sense. Provider, close it. Okay, save it. It's not showing anything because we're not sending the data anywhere. We're not rendering anything. In here, it's giving us the error about element type is invalid except a string builder. I think it's expecting the government component to be like exported. That we're not exporting anything here. Let's use the family component as like a template. So let's actually copy all of it and just change the family here. Let's actually remove most of the stuff here. Let's remove this. Let's change this to president. This would be president. So this would be this component, and this would be governor's component. Governors, yeah. Okay. So here we have to import those two. Okay. We don't need this. We don't even need this. We don't need this part. So now it's kind of like cleaner. Okay. So now basically what we're doing is we're rendering two things. We're rendering the president and we're rendering the governor, not the children, governors. Right? And we have a space between them. So this div is a space and we have two things here. Hopefully that makes sense. Now we just need to import those two components, so governors from governors, and then president from president. Import president from president. So that's that. Instead of family tree, this would be government. Government. Also, you have to, sorry, government, save it. If we remove this, it should render something to the screen, right? Like that. The reason for that is because these two components have nothing in them. So that's where the problem is coming from. And we still have to use context, okay? So far, any questions? What we did?
I've never seen that div is space at first. I understand what you're doing, but this is my first time.
Oh, the space one here?
Yeah.
So this one is just a class that I created. It's inside the CSS, right? So if we go to the CSS, there's a class called spacer that we created. What is it? Space. Wait, what is it? Is that what it's called? Spacer, yeah. Class, it's a normal class. What is it? Yeah, if we don't have it in here, we can just get rid of it, actually. I don't think we need it. Thought I created it. So we don't even need this div. Okay. So far that's, simpler and cleaner. Now let's actually do let's see if we have the data, if we have the data in here. So let's get rid of governor and president, and then let's cancel. Let's actually create a variable. Let's call it data. Let's call it let's call it data equal to use context, and then we have to import the data, right? Import. We call it government context. I think that's what we called it. And we're bringing it from the app.js, which is up here. So we're passing this in use context like that. And then let's console log this one. Console log data. All right, where is it? So open this here. So we have one array with that president. Inside it, there's two arrays with the governors. So there's a governor, two governors, and one president. So that's good. So we have what we need. This is the president. So we have what we need. Now we just need to render it. So let's bring back the components here. As president. And here will be governors. So now we're not going to pass any props here. We're just going to go directly to them. And we could actually use the similar idea as here, children. So let's copy children. And let's go to governors. Change the children to governors. I'm learning the spelling of governors today. It was always hard for me. Okay, governors. This would be government. Context. So we pass that right here. Pass it like that. And instead of children, this would be governors. Right? That'll be governors. And then we're basically getting the name and the image. That's all we're doing. So that should work. Now, the president is the same thing. I'm just gonna pass, we're just gonna do the same component. And we're just gonna change here to president. And then here, instead of governors, we're gonna say president. I mean, we don't have to actually say president here. We don't need to loop through it because president is one thing. So we don't need all this looping. We could just directly say right here, we don't need this key. We don't need this p. Let's just say value dot image, and this would be value dot name. And here would be value dot name. Right. So cannot read property map. Where is that? It's governors. Okay. Value dot governors. Governors. Did I spell correctly? Let's go back to data. Here we spelled it like that, so that's what we're trying to render. Okay. Let's console log value here. Value, let's say value dot governors. The load G. Let's see that. Okay, so we have the governors here. Now we have the government. It's not what we're looking for. This is not it. Let's just say value. It should be the same as the other one. Should have two of them. Three. So, so we have. Okay, so we have the value, which is all the data, and then we need governors, right? So let's look at the data. So the data says, okay, oh, we have to go through government. Okay. So we have to say value, we have to value that government that governors. So here should be government dot governors. Is that how it's spelled? Government. Should be spelled like this. Okay. No. We're not going through government. What's going on? Okay, we are just doing governors. The governor is an array and has objects, so we should map through it. So we will write, like we'll write here, value dot governors, and then dot map. Okay. Another property map. Okay, that's strange. Value, we have the value here. Let's name it here. I'll look at it. Value right here. So value. Yeah, it's just a governors. It's two arrays. So this is another array. So it's array within an array. Okay, let's look at what we did here. it's mapping through children. And here in app.js, it's just passing all the data. And let's go to children and console log value. Should be same. Yeah, so children. Okay. Oh, it's an object. Okay, get it. So all of them, they go under object, and then each one is okay. I think it's the way our data is set up. That's kind of messing it up. So we have an array, and then we have an object. But when we go to this data, we have an array of object, and then the children is an array. It's the same thing. Okay, let's go back to it. Let's say here, instead of
can you cancel what value dot something? What comes after value?
it will
So you
not
can narrow down.
it will not render. That's the problem. It will. What I can do is I can destructure the value. So I can say const, and I can say here governors, and then say here value. Okay, and then maybe use that here. Maybe you console log this first before we do anything. Let's call it gov. Maybe spelling is correct. It's not correct. The spelling. So gov. There's nothing in governors. Sometimes if you mistakenly type something, it can derail everything you're doing. So let's see. So value should be, so this should be an object instead of an array. Okay, so let's correct our data. So we have an array. So let's see this array, and then we have an object inside it. Okay. Right here, the way they sent that data is by passing the value active family. So they pass in each family instead of the whole data. So on children is grabbing the value. Okay, so let's actually see the if we remove here the governor. Let's see if the president renders. Okay, president, we have it here, and we have the data for the president. So president is only one. Value dot, oh, okay, we have to say value dot president. That image in here, value dot president dot name. Okay. All our data is kind of corrupt the way we set it up. Let's actually grab the whole data here. Let's set it up exactly the way it's set up here in here. I'm not sure what's wrong with it. Okay. Okay, let's see. I think I understand a little bit of what's going on. So instead of here, we need to pass like the first element here, right? Because that's what they're doing in the app. And then after that, in here, governors, so save this. Governors, we could say value dot governors. We have to pass the governors here. Yeah, that's how it should work. And here president, we say what we're doing right now, I think. Let's see here. Let's get rid of this for now. Let's see here. President.name. Should we map through the president too? Value, okay. Yeah, I don't think we need to map through the president because the president.
It's only one item.
It's one item, so we don't need to make it this. So president, we could just use a one. We don't need to use that. Oh, we still have to use it because it's the way it's set up. Okay, never mind. So let's say it's only one item, but it's in an array. So we have to use 0. Yeah, we have to use 0 inside there. Where is it? We have to use. Yeah, no, we have to use like a 0. We have to say 0, the first array basically. So here when we say value dot president, president, we have to say 0 here. See, it works there. That's because we already have the data set up in a weird way, but it's fine. But yeah, as you can see, this is the government, the president, and then governors. So it kind of trickles down that way. So that took longer than I expected. But the main thing is we're passing context API. We're creating a create context API here.
Can we also share this one? Sorry.
Sure, no problem. Okay. Yeah, so we're passing it and we're saying here we're creating the provider by using the variable we created. And then we pass in the state here. So this is the state. We're passing it through here. And then this is the component that we're passing everything to, right? So that component right here has 2 other components that can also get that data. But we don't have to pass it directly. We could just go to those components and use the use context here to, we don't need all this. Use the use context to grab the data, the state, and then render it that way. So either loop through it or render it in a different way. You just have to understand how the data is kind of displayed. So any question? Okay, all right. Hopefully that makes it a little bit easier for anyone who's confused about the first one. So I wasn't expecting it to take this long, but I was doing it at the top of my head, so I didn't have anything already prepared. Okay, so I'll share that. Any other question, anything else you want to ask, feel free.
Man, can you share with this one?
Which one?
The last one.
Oh, the last one. Yeah. I think I shared it. Let me share the whole the shorter link.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to the assignment for today. So the assignment, we go to here, daily task. It's a shopping cart, right? So this assignment, I'm not sure 100% if it's completely working. I will work on it tonight, and then you guys can get started with tomorrow. So I'll test it tonight. I'm sure I tested it, but it was 4 months ago when I fixed the issues and all that stuff. So in this module, you'll learn newfound knowledge of context API, refactor the e-commerce store to use the context API. So this e-commerce is already built with what do you call props, right? It's using props. So use the context API to refactor it. Read instructions, use the, do the instructions. The MVP, before get started, please take a few minutes and get acquainted with the application, understand what's going on and how it's working. If you look into the app.js, you'll notice that there are currently 2 state properties, products to keep track of all available products, and cart that will keep track of all the items in our cart. So you can go ahead and read the instructions. I would say always read the instructions. So these steps will help you a lot if you're confused about anything, if you don't understand anything. Always read these instructions. I know it's a really long instruction, 7 steps, but this is how you learn. This is how you understand something. By reading, you understand. So all of us, anyone who's a developer, they go through this stage of like reading something, so understanding it. It's not easy, but it's just understanding the different parts of something. And by reading is the best way. Okay, any questions so far?
Do we have to use the route, or we don't have to use that method for
The other method, this one, the consumer?
No, for the assignment. I remember when we talked about like routing and all that.
It's the application is already built, so you don't have to build anything. The route already built. So as you can see here, we have a couple of routes that are already built. We have a navigation component. We have 2 routes, one for the home place and one for the cart. So now if you want to use a context API, then you could make these providers. So you could put one provider on all of them if you want, or whatever way. So I mean, this one is the cart, so it needs like the cart information, which is this state. So now you will send this will be the cart context. So you could create 2 context API, one for the carts, one for the products. So, and then wrap around each one of them their own provider. Then that's it. Then you pass the data, the state, right, in the value, and you remove the props. So this is the props. Now you just go to the other components that these are expecting. So like product is expecting props from there. So you get rid of all the things that relate to props, and you bring in use context, and that way you could render the data. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, any other question before we close? All right, I'll see you guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow, inshallah. Try your best to finish it. And also I said that we're changing how long you guys are going to be doing the assignments. So I'll do a poll, so you guys can decide if you want to do it 2 days or 1 day, depending on depending on like how you want this to be finished. Because if we say let's do the assignment for 2 days, let's give it 2 days, then we're gonna finish it in like 8 to like 10 months, the whole project. Otherwise, if we do it the same way we're doing right now, we're gonna finish it in like maybe like 3-4 months. So it depends. So I'll write down the instructions and also the poll. So I'll let you know
You
that.
said 10 months from now?
No. Within from now, the whole thing will take about 8 to 10 months if we give it 2 days, right? Starting from now, I didn't do the whole calculation, but that's kind of like my guess. Because right now we're doing every other day, right? We're doing every other day except the like Saturday and Sunday. So it's faster. But if we give the assignment 2 days, then that would be almost like close to double of the original time, right?
Yeah.
So it just
We,
depends. It just depends how fast you want to finish, and how if you want to learn slower, or if you guys want to finish it quicker. It's just the way you guys want to do it, inshallah. So we'll see what you guys agree on, inshallah. All right. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.